Zac Dalton works at St. Croix Rods, one of the largest rod manufacturers in the country. And today you're going to hear how fly rods really get designed, what makes the cut, what doesn't, and why some rods last decades while others don't. This is the Wet Fly Swing Podcast, where I show you the best places to travel to for fly fishing, how to find the best resources and tools to prepare for that big trip, and what you can do to give back to the fish species we all love. We've got Zac Dalton on the podcast today from St. Croix, and you're going to discover why not every rod should be fast. We're going to get into some different actions. They've had some for many years. We're going to find out what durability really means for anglers who fish hard, and also about rod action, how that affects fishing and some casting. And then we're going to get into a little bit on the conventional as well today, towards the end. So stay tuned on this one. We're going to get a nice update from St. Croix, hear all the good stuff we have going. Plus, Zac breaks down how they choose the right rod for the perfect fishing situation. We're going to talk about corks, cork handles, and actions. And I hope you enjoy this one. Let's get into it. Here he is, Zac Dalton. You can find him at stcroixrods.com. How's it going, Zac?
I'm doing well, Dave. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah. I'm excited to talk about this one. I didn't even look back in the catalog. I know we had at St. Croix at least one episode in the past out there. We'll put a link in the show notes to that one. I always love telling the story because, you know, when back in the day, the old shop, we used to carry St. Croix, and I think for a lot of it, they were blanks because my dad was a big custom rod maker, and we used to make, and to this day, I've got one right sitting here next to me. I got a St. Croix rod that I made, you know, and I wasn't as good as my dad, but I love it because St. Croix was a cool brand. They were out there, and you guys are still out there, so I think we're going to get updated on what's new with St. Croix and all that. But yeah, maybe first just take us back to your background. I know you worked with Farbank before. What's your first memory in fly fishing?
Oh, Dave, I'm a lifer in this business so far. So I started at Rio in 1997 when that brand was really in its infancy, and was part of the team that put together the fly line manufacturing equipment and helped get it off the ground. Believe it or not, I actually predate Simon in that business.
Oh, you do? So was that before, because we had Mark Bill on, I can't remember now what the dates, but was that before Farbank came to be?
Oh, yeah. Yep. So Farbank purchased Rio in 2005.
2005. Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha. So 8 years before that happens, you're in there. So you're in Rio doing just, what was your role there?
Well, you know, the business is so small. I think I was employee number 11. So you got to wear a lot of different hats, you know, with a company that size. So, you know, doing everything from manufacturing fly lines, mixing plastic to, you know, for fly line coating, customer service, you name it. As the business grew, it kind of got a little bit more, you know, specific on what job duties and roles were, and inevitably ended up in sales.
Okay. And then you were there for like 20 years, so up until 17, is that the correct 2017?
No, I think it was 2021.
2021, okay.
Yeah, and then I left Farbank that year, took a year off, and then kind of re-engaged in the space with St. Croix.
Yeah, with St. Croix. So you're back on. What's it like now being with St. Croix? And I don't know the whole story, but does it feel different as far, I'm not sure the size of the company. I mean, St. Croix has a pretty good, strong background too in the conventional arena, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, St. Croix is a sneaky, large manufacturing company, predominantly in the conventional space. So they're the largest USA rod manufacturer by a pretty
no kidding
sizable percentage. Absolutely.
Oh, wow. So you're talking all the bass and and all the conventional, you name it, even I mean all the species, right? So St. Croix is the biggest out there.
Yep, true statement.
Yeah, so the fly
in the U.S., there's probably larger, conglomerates coming out of Asia that have sizable volume, but for domestic production, it's St. Croix.
Yeah, and St. Croix has always had, a connection in the fly. So what is that like now there? Is it you with a small staff, large staff on the fly side? What does that look like?
Well, if I was given the amount of staff based off the percentage of business, I think it would still be me.
Yeah.
So I'm doing a lot of kind of the brass tack of the category for the brand, but do have a great support staff with the marketing team, the
Hmm.
engineering team, and everybody else in admin. But yeah, no, it's just like I said, the fly portion is a small percentage of the business, and the CEO of St. Croix, a man named Scott Forrestal, was an individual that I worked with at Sage and Farbank
Mm.
prior to coming to St. Croix. So we have some history there, and he liked what I was doing in the space and my time with my previous employer, and was excited to get me on board.
Yep. And what do you do? What's your daily like out at St. Croix these days?
Maybe not too dissimilar from Rio in its infancy. With it being a smaller category, I get to wear a lot of hats. Those hats include managing the sales team, product development, yeah,
Yeah.
doing trade shows. So, I think that a lot of these fly fishing businesses that are, pretty small, you're always working with a smaller staff with crews that are doing quite a bit of different, tasks throughout the brand.
Right. Yeah. It seems like with the rods out there, there's so many, small, medium, big size rods and all sorts of in between, right? And specialties too. So, I'm not sure, like with St. Croix, do you guys look when you think of development? Are you thinking these are the categories, whether it's Euro nymphing or steelhead or something like that, that you're focusing on, or do you try to kind of cover it all, or what does that look like for St. Croix?
Well, I think it's hard for a brand like St. Croix to have be everything to everybody. So we're really focused on having a good, better, best story that's pretty robust as far as a rod assortment is concerned, and being able to give people the option based off of feature set, carbon fiber technology to really get them into the space, so they can start with our Connect rod at $295 and go from there to our Imperial rod that's at $395. And the Imperial rod is probably the longest continually produced fly rod under that namesake in the market. So it's been in production, the Imperial has, in one way, shape, or form since 1948.
Yeah, that's right. 1948. So how long has St. Croix been around? What is that history?
Yeah, right around there, right around
Yeah.
1947, 1948. When I came on board, they were just celebrating their 75th anniversary. So yeah, so I think they're probably at the 78th anniversary, and it's just an amazing family business. With the Schluter family, that what they've done to kind of support the community where the rods are manufactured. Keep it rooted to the ground, and really kind of keep focus on what makes St. Croix unique and special.
So are they manufactured in the U.S.?
Yep. Our Connect series, we also have a Mexican facility
Yep.
in Fresnillo, Mexico, that we own. So it's a 100% vertically integrated manufacturing facility down there. And a good chunk of the lower price point conventional product is built there, with the rest of it being manufactured in Park Falls, Wisconsin.
In Wisconsin, right? So that's the majority. And I'm looking at the series, and you mentioned the Imperial, and I remember again, yeah, that one's been around forever. And I see the Evos, the Technica, the Legend, that one's been around a while, right? And then the Tannic and the Connect. You mentioned the Bass, the
Well, yeah,
Moho.
we got the Mojo Bass too,
Yeah.
which is a fun little rod. So when I walked in, we were kind of well down the line of developing the Evos fly rod and Evos salt fly rods, and those came to market about 2.5 years ago. Not far behind that was the Technica rod. And the Technica rod is a presentation oriented rod, fun little series, 6 rods in the rod family, kind of covering your 3 weight to 5 weight, with the dry fly presentations kind of being the focus of that rod series.
Gotcha. So that's the Technica, the Evos, and then you mentioned the Legend. The Legend's one that's been around for a while too, right? The Legend Elite.
We actually just reintroduced it this year at ICAST, so it's a heritage namesake, and it has been in the assortment several different times. But it had been out for about the last 4 or 5 years now, probably 5 years. So I had an opportunity to work with the team and re-engineer that one, and bring the Legend Elite freshwater and saltwater rods to market.
There you go. And are you spending, I know your background, you love the salt. Do you spend a lot of time thinking about the saltwater stuff? Like what percentage wise, it must be still, right? The fresh is quite a majority of the rod sales.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think if you look at any business in fly, 75% of it will be made up in freshwater fishing. And if you're in these other categories, 15% would probably be salt, 15% could be two-handed stuff. But that's kind of the general split for the industry as a whole.
That's it. Okay. And do you guys, yeah, you have the two-handed stuff too?
We do the Imperial Switch right now. But we've got some stuff that we've been working on yeah, keep your eye on the space. In another 6 months, you might be seeing something cool coming down the pipe.
Oh, good. So yeah, I see it, the Imperial Switch, and the Switch is again, I think there's been some different names thrown out there, but I mean, it's just a short two-handed rod, right? Or what is your definition of the Switch?
I think, if you asked a bunch of different rod designers or a bunch of tenured individuals in the business, it would be a rod that you could both, spay cast with and overhead cast with. But you can do that with any rod at the end of the day, whether it's, a 6'2" weight or, a 14'9" weight. They're all capable of that at the end of the day.
They're capable of what I've heard is that the Switch you should be able to cast single-handed all day long without getting tired, right?
Yeah, whoever said that, I'll agree with them.
Yeah, so I mean that makes sense because some of these rods, the big ones might be hard to do, but they're getting lighter. I mean, do you guys find that? Have you found the tech and just the rod, material that as that's changed, it's made it easier? What's that look like for you from your end?
Well, I think you look at rod kind of at its base form, and it's a sheet of carbon, fiber. You find a mandrel, you roll it around it, and I think what goes in or comes out of that carbon fiber at the end of the day kind of, drives one, kind of the responsiveness and the weight of the blank. And then, of course, you've got the component aspect with the handle, the reel seat, and the guide train that all kind of, drive that overall weight conversation. And I mean, if you look at everything that's in the market now, everything's pretty dang light.
Yeah,
you're really at a point in time where you're splitting the finest of hairs.
Yep. Yeah, it's all light and all fast, as fast as you want it to be, right? Do you guys find with your lamp, we talked about it, whether it's the Legend or the different series that you have different actions? Like, talk about that a little bit. Like, if somebody was coming in to buy a rod,
Yeah.
how would you be telling them, where to get started?
Well, I think, of course, you're going to want to fill that angler out, see what type of rod action that they're predisposed to like or have a familiarity with, and kind of drive the conversation from there. And with the reintroduction of the Legend Elite this year, we deliberately went kind of a moderate fast route instead of a fast action route. The Evos and the Evos Salt, they squarely align with that, fast action definition. And, I think you could probably have a conversation about price point and action, but I don't know if that's the best way to go about it. I think that as a somebody that's on the design team and offers input on what actions should look like, I think that we got a market that's heavily saturated with fast, and that's one of the reasons that we went down the moderate fast route with the Legend Elite, just to give a little bit more definition to specific rod families, a reason to take a look at it, if you will. And then beyond that, I think it kind of turns to a specialty conversation. What's this rod trying to achieve? A good example of that would be the Technica, or the new Tannic series that we came out with this year. Rod actions that are designed to really solve a specific problem or a fishery or target species.
Mm-hmm. And was the Tannic, was that specifically for the giant predators sort of fish?
A little bit. We've got two different, you call it subsets within the Tannic rod family. We've got the Tannic bass and we've got the Tannic musky pike. And the musky pike iteration is clearly, predator focused, whereas the Tannic bass, I think that's just a little bit more all warm water, all rounded. and you got to be careful that you don't, paint yourself into a corner with a product like this, because this rod would function great, for streamer fishing for trout or saltwater applications as well. But as a brand and a manufacturer, you got to have a marketing story to tell. And that's going to be one of the aspects of the Tannic series, that it's warm water focused, has the ability to cast big flies, great load carrying capacity, very efficient in its overall functionality.
Nice, yeah. And we're heading up on a trip up to Scott Lake in northern Saskatchewan for pike, and that's going to be the focus. And so I guess if we were looking at that, what would be the rod? It looks like this might be, the Tannic might be the rod to bring up there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. The Tannic 1090 would be, ideally suited. I don't know if you get fish, if you're starting to creep up into those 50, 60 inchers up there.
Yeah, they got some over 40. I'm not sure if they got them up to 50, but they might.
Yeah. So yeah, 10 weight I think would be, a great option for that fishery.
So a 9 foot. And these rods are pretty cool because they have a big fighting butt. Now, is that a fighting butt or is that for casting two-handed too?
Both.
Both.
We've seen a lot of that kind of evolve, and mostly musky fisheries, less so in pike fisheries, but the overall size of the fly has gotten huge. So, you need to have mass to carry mass, and the size of fly lines that are being used on 11 and 12 weight rods now are, well over their AFTMA rating. I think that You've got guys using, 5 to 700 grain lines on an 11 weight, and that's just to get enough mass out of the fly line to propel the fly.
Wow. Yeah, so the giant flies, giant fly line, and you got to go bigger with the rod. So, but you're saying the 10 foot or the 10 weight is good for pike? Like pike, you can go down to the lower end of it. You don't need a 12 weight.
Oh, no, I don't think so. Not at that, that 40-inch mark. You'd get away with probably even an 8 weight.
Would you like to level up your fly fishing game this year? Head over to smitty'sflybox.com, your one-stop shop for top-quality flies, tying materials, gear, and accessories online. Whether you're hunting trout in riffles, stock and steelhead in a slick, or tie-in in your garage late at night, Smitty's has the hooks, beads, dubbing, and everything you need to get the job done. Check out Smitty's right now at wetflyswing.com/Smitty's. That's SMITTYS. Smitty's. Get what you need at smitty'sflybox.com. Located in Boulder, Colorado, Intrepid Camp Gear is dedicated to designing and manufacturing the best and most highly engineered automotive camp gear on the market. Intrepid Camp Gear specializes in rooftop tents and aluminum cargo cases designed for skis, rods, hunting gear, and any other gear you may be hauling. Elevate your adventure with Intrepid Camp Gear right now. Head over to wetflyswing.com/Intrepid right now. That's Intrepid, INTREPID, Intrepid Camp Gear. What about if we switch over, staying on the species route a little bit? I know you like a little tarpon fishing. What would be your rod for tarpon?
Oh, kind of depends on the fishery. I'm pretty fond of, the ocean and the Keys, Oceanside and the Florida Keys. It's clear water. It's challenging. You want something that can load quick, deliver a nice subtle presentation, and, still have the ability to fight the fish. So, Evo Salt and a 10 weight or an 11 weight would be my go-to for that application.
Okay, yeah, the Evo Salt. And what would be the difference between the Evo Salt and the other one we talked about for the pike? On those two rods?
Yeah, well, one of the things that you noted was the handle design.
Yeah, the handle.
With the Tannic, you're going to have a longer fighting butt that's about 4 inches long. One, to kind of give you that two-hand assist on a casting technique, and to do a figure 8 retrieve once you're boat side with the rod. So that's not something that you would want in a clearwater tarpon fishing situation. You want something that inevitably going to retrieve, to the boat side, but you're not going to get a tarpon. Well, you probably could, but that wouldn't be something that you would try first off with a figure 8 retrieve,
Okay. Yeah, right.
In clearwater. But and it's going to be a little bit more robust too from just a build standpoint. So it's made for efficiency and load carrying capacity, and the Evo Salt, that's going to be made for a little bit more delicacy and giving you, probably a finer more fluid casting stroke versus just trying to yard something big out there, if that makes sense,
Right. And then the Evos, like on the saltwater page here, you've got the Legend, Elite, you got the Evos and the Imperial. Is that just a different price point, or what is the difference
Yep.
between those
Yeah,
three?
there are going to be different carbon fiber technology stories that go into that. There's going to be higher component quality that goes into each one of those based off a price point too.
Gotcha. Okay, so that would be, and then what would be out of those if you're again bonefish, any one of those three categories? If you're just going for more of the smaller bonefish, just a little less lower weight.
Yeah, probably a 7 or an 8 weight. I prefer pretty fast action rods there. I want I want my fly line to move immediately and be able to kind of redirect that immediately. A faster action rod that doesn't deflect as much when you're trying to pick line up off the water is more efficient for me as an angler and a caster. So, I'm probably going to lend myself to those Evo salts for a majority of my fishing, but, not to kind of downplay the Imperial salt or the Legend Elite salt. There's some sweetheart rods within those series that, on any given day, whether it's like a flat calm day, I might prefer something a little bit more moderate action just because I know I'm not going to have to be that reactive in that situation, or I might not have to battle the wind as
The
much. So
wind,
I
right?
can do something that's a little bit, more forgiving on a casting stroke, doesn't throw as tight a loop, and is, sometimes funner to fight fish on.
That makes sense. Do you guys? I mentioned earlier about the blanks. Is that something? I don't know if you remember that time when St. Croix had blanks,
Mm-hmm.
but it seems like there were more brands maybe doing that. Do you see that out there, or brands are still selling blanks for like custom rods?
A little bit, and I would say that that's kind of been a dying aspect of the specialty space for a couple of years now. St. Croix still sells blanks, but it doesn't market the blank program to specialty dealers like some of the other competitors in this space do. They've got a brand called Rod Geeks that really caters to the custom rod builder. There's fly rod blanks within the offering there. But I think more specifically, I think that custom rod builder, is it's, something that's slowed down in recent years. You don't have as many rod builders out there. I've always appreciated, the space because,
Yeah, definitely.
oftentimes, those are the guys that get to be really creative on trim wraps or hardware that go on to it. So I think it's, is equal to, fly tying as far as the creative outlet's concerned.
Yeah, definitely. And even looking at it's interesting, the cork on the Tannic, it's got the it's a different cork, right? What is that? It's got kind of the black mixed in there. Is that a different just type resin, or what is that?
Yeah, no, it's a product called Cactus Cork. It is actually manufactured from cork, but it's compressed and then it's flame treated to kind of give it the durability. You kind of look at it maybe like a whiskey barrel. That could be an analogy, where they go in and they flame all those things to make sure that they don't rot out or they
Oh,
don't have
right.
whiskey permeate the wood and soak the wood. So this is maybe similar, maybe not exactly, and but I think that could be the closest thing I can kind of come up with to describe it.
That's right.
But what it does is, gets a really nice in-hand fill, makes the grip incredibly durable, and it still, feels a lot like cork. And when we were developing the Tannic rod series and kind of talking to a bunch of different experts within the space, the one thing that they wanted was, the most durable rod out there. Finesse clearly is not part of
Mm, yeah.
that fishery. So, you're looking for a rod that's going to be able to get drug across the gunnel of a boat and not break and just beat the holy living crap out of it, frankly.
Yep.
And if you look at the different handles out there and all the testing that we went through to kind of land on what we thought was going to be the most durable in class, this Cactus Cork handles what we landed on.
Hmm. Nice. And you mentioned you're going to be, you've got the show season coming up right around the corner. As we're talking, actually, when this goes live, it's probably going to be going. Where are you going to be at? Are you going to hit all the shows, a few of them? How does that look?
We've got 4 that are on our docket. First off is going to be Edison, the fly fishing show in Edison, New Jersey. Right after that, the fly fishing show in Denver, Colorado. From there, we're going to go to one that's in our backyard in March. That's the Great Waters Fly Fishing Expo in St. Paul, Minnesota. And then after that one, we're going to go to my hometown, Idaho Falls, for the East Idaho Fly Fishing Expo.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, looking forward to all 4 of them.
So that's your hometown. So you grew up in Idaho Falls?
Yep.
Nice, nice. And so you grew up in Idaho Falls, and then where'd you, after that, where'd you head out to?
I left Idaho Falls in I think 2012 to move to Bainbridge Island, Washington. So, I've those are the only two places I've really ever lived.
Yeah, those are two places, right? So that was Bainbridge. So you moved to Bainbridge, and that's when the Farbank started, or
well,
Rio.
yeah, it was shortly.
Shortly
It was a
after.
couple years after Farbank acquired Rio that I moved to Bainbridge Island.
Gotcha. Okay. And what was it like growing up in Idaho Falls?
Well, man, I don't know if you've been out there, but you
I have.
clearly,
It's been a little while. I've been through there, a few times.
well, you're going to get some bias, and I don't know if you'll share my bias, but I think it's one of the best trout towns in North America. You got the accessibility of the South Fork and the Henry's Fork, within 15 minutes to 45 minutes away, depending on where you want to go fish. The river through town can fish really well too, and you're right on the edge of Yellowstone National Park and Southwest Montana with the Madison. But that all kind of involved leaving fish to find fish, right? So,
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I'm going to drive past the South Fork to go into, go over to Jackson and fish the Snake over there, go, fish another Wyoming river, or, I'm going to drive past the Henry's Fork to go to the Madison. And not that I didn't do that, I did that all the time, but I think that, just the accessibility, the amount of water that's just within, a short drive from Idaho Falls is pretty tough to beat.
Yeah, it's right there. And what was the fly shop back then? Who was your local fly shop in Idaho Falls?
Well, that was Jimmy's All-Season Angler, owned by Jimmy Gabitas, and it's now Fly Fish Food Jimmy's, owned by the Fly Fish Food Crew.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Jimmy's. We've done. I haven't had Jimmy on yet, but I'm hoping to track him down. I know he's out there fishing and probably staying busy.
He's a legend.
Yeah.
And again, you might get some bias out of me, but that's definitely been one of my favorite fly shops that I've ever been into. I've been into 140 fly shops across the country. And,
Really, 140.
140 and
Wow.
I guess across the globe. And, Jimmy's is still one that I'd love to go into. I'll be going into it next week to tell the crew hi.
You will?
Oh, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I've heard, I think when we talked to Curtis, I think he said they something like doubled. He was already known as a fly tying shop, but they doubled the inventory of fly, right? It's even bigger than it used to be.
Oh, yeah. I was in there not long ago, like before the Thanksgiving holiday, and went in and said hi to everybody. And they were definitely well stocked on everything that you could possibly want.
Yeah. And so 140 shops, how many shops, do you know how many fly shops there are in the U.S.?
I think it's kind of a little bit of a guess at this stage. Maybe 10 or 15 years ago, we'd have long conversations about, the size of the industry, the number of shops out there. Right now, I think it's probably around 400 fly shops in the U.S.
Oh, that's it? Just 400?
Yeah, there's more outlets that sell fly fishing equipment, right?
Equipment,
A true specialty fly shop, there's probably about 400.
That's pretty cool. So I was way off. I was estimating, I don't know where the number came from, but I had like 5,000 in my head for that. Not even close. So we're an order of magnitude off of that, probably.
It's just 10x.
Wow. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. So so there's not that many. So you've probably seen a third of the shops, if not more than the shops around. Yeah. And if you think about it by state, just by the U.S., it's, the bigger states are going to obviously have more, but, you've been around. So you've traveled a lot through your job, your positions here?
Oh, yeah. I think that might be one of the reasons that folks gravitate towards this industry is to get an opportunity to travel and fish a bunch of different places. Sometimes that pans out. Sometimes, you're just traveling in the middle of winter and hope that your flight takes off and gets you home. But
Right.
so timing's important there. Maybe focus your travel, if you're going to go out and visit shops in May or June, depending on where runoffs happen in some of those areas, or, go down to Southeast Florida and visit those guys. If timing's right in May,
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities, and you guys cover a little bit of everything. It seems like, right? You have your, like you mentioned, the tannic rods, which are specifically for pike, although there is some overlap with other species. Mm-hmm. Where it sounds like that one came out more recently. How do you decide to go down the pike muskie versus say going down some other route? That must be a decent sized chunk of the market, I'm guessing.
Yeah, for St. Croix, for sure. Kind of given where the business is located in, the Northwoods of Wisconsin and it being a true warm water state. And a lot of the brand equity, is squarely focused in the warm water game. So kind of look at
Makes
some of
sense.
the old advertising that they've got hanging on the walls in St. Croix. It's pretty cool and it's very muskie centric. Park Falls, Wisconsin, prior to being renamed Park Falls, was Muskellunge Falls, Wisconsin.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So and St. Croix, of course, we're talking the St. Croix. Is that the history there? That the St. Croix River? Is that kind of where that all came from?
Well, yeah, kind of in a nutshell, St. Croix was on the banks of the St. Croix River in Minnesota, is where it was, originally founded, and then through an ownership change when it was handed over to the Schluter family, and I don't have the year,
Yeah,
forgive me on
sure.
this one, but they relocated the business straight east to Park Falls, Wisconsin. So now it's a little bit longer hike to the St. Croix River.
It is a little bit longer, but you're still in that same area. Yeah, we were up there. I guess it's been a couple years now. We went through St. Paul, Minneapolis, and all. It's a cool area. I mean, there's definitely lots of water up there, right? I mean, that's the thing. It's pretty hard to beat all the opportunities. It seems like.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, from a product development standpoint, it's pretty endless. You've got the Flambeau River, the Chippewa River, Eagle River. I mean, there's a lot of rivers within a stone's throw of the St. Croix factory. It's not even 500 yards from the banks of the Flambeau River. So, if you got something that you've prototyped and you want to go out and test in the afternoon, you've got that ability to do it.
Right, right, cool. Well, are you kind of like, as far as the fly rods, are you a casting nerd? Are you like a casting instructor? Are you at that higher level, or what's your experience there?
Nerd might be a better way to describe it for sure. I've had the pleasure of, learning from a lot of the best casters in the space over the course of my career. Gosworth, the Ray Jeffs, Jerry Seam, the list goes on. It's hard, when you spend time with those guys to not become a better caster. You'd have to make a conscious effort to suck at it after that.
Yeah, after getting a coaching from Ray Jeff, yeah, that's pretty sweet. But and so yeah, and I guess going back to the rods again, we talk about different actions and stuff like that. If you think of rods, distance, durability, weight, all that stuff, how do you factor that? Because you can't have everything. What goes into your mindset and are you working pretty closely as you're developing a new rod with the folks, putting that together?
Yeah, I do get the final say on the rod action. So that might be a blessing, a curse, and maybe a lot of responsibility at the end of the day. But you're personally, my mindsets are around functionality, usability, and in-hand feel. I think that you want the rod when you flex it to feel like it's bending pretty uniformly, depending on whatever rod action that is, whether it's a slow action rod, moderate action rod, or fast action rod. You're kind of looking for that fluidity and smoothness that might be a key indicator that you got something that's quality built in your hand at the end of the day. And aside from that, I look at efficiency as another kind of key attribute in rod design. Too many false casts in a lot of situation or can be counterproductive. So the faster that you can get that rod loaded up and smooth out your loop to deliver the fly, that would be the efficiency aspect of it. And you can tune rods infinitely with all the fly lines that are on the market today. So, you can take some pretty poor rods that are on the market and go through the exercise of tuning it with the fly line, and you can probably, get something that's pretty fishable at the end of the day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think so. Or you can take a premium product and not go through such an exercise because, the functionality in the rod and the design is going to lend itself to accommodating more fly lines. So,
So a premium rod will actually allow you to put more different lines on the rod and still cast effectively.
yeah, oh yeah, I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah.
And a lot of that's going to be, dependent on what, style of fishing you're doing, how far you're casting, what size of flies you're utilizing at the end of the day. But those rods that are, well built, well engineered, well thought through, they're going to have, a wider range of versatility than some of the off the shelf stuff.
What about the price point? It seems like you've got these different price points. You got 200, 400, 600,000. Is that nowadays just a matter of, really how much money you have because they're all going to perform pretty well? Or how do you describe that? If somebody's coming in here to buy a rod, how do they think about that discussion? Because you're right, some people might have more money to spend.
Well, yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think price aversion, if there's one thing that I've heard in you call it the last 3 years, is that, there's a lot of price sensitivity in the market. And with a lot of manufacturers, ourselves included, you get a little bit of trickle down technology, right? So the stuff that was at the top of the shelf 10 years ago is now at the middle of the shelf. And that stuff's still pretty dang good.
Still pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And we've heard that on the podcast. I mean, some of the champion casters out there are using rods from the 80s because the action is right. You know what I mean? It's not
Sure.
about the brand new fastest thing necessarily.
Right. No, that's the true story. So and there's been so many good rods that have been developed over the years, and I know why a tournament caster would kind of gravitate to, one of those specific rods for one reason or the other. It's something that the manufacturer has probably gone away from, and they've adapted their casting stroke and their technique to achieve their best performance with it. And you kind of, you stick with something like that for a reason.
Stonefly Nets makes nets with soul, each one handcrafted to stand out and built to last. When you spend time on the water, your gear matters, and these are the kinds of nets you can pass down for generations. I know my Stonefly net goes with me everywhere and has seen the abuse, but it seems to get better each day I'm on the water. Every net is shaped from premium hardwoods, balanced by hand and finished to handle a lifetime of use. We all love a big fish story, but it's the moments around it that stick. Stonefly helps turn every one of those into something you'll remember. Head over to stoneflynets.com right now to see what stories you can create with this beautiful custom landing net. That's stoneflynets.com. We've heard many of the stories on this podcast. Togiak River Lodge is one of the great destinations for swinging flies for Chinook, stripping for coho all day, and unwinding in a lodge right on the riverbank of the Togiak River. With access to all 5 salmon species plus rainbows, Dolly Varden, and more, Togiak offers a true Alaskan experience. Picture over 30 miles of river, seasoned guides, high-quality boats, and low fishing pressure. It's fly fishing Alaska at its best. I'll be heading up this summer, so reach out to Jordan and the crew to see what dates they have available this year. You can learn more right now at wetflyswing.com/Togiak. That's Togiak, Togiak. Alaskan fly fishing like you've always dreamed about. Well, have we missed anything in the lineup here? I'm just looking. You guys have a lot going here, and I'm just trying to, I'm looking at now some surf, some near shore. What do you, anything you want to shed light on that we haven't talked about here today?
I think just one thing that I would shed some light on is probably the diversity in some of these families that you're going to see from St. Croix. If you look at kind of a competitive set that's in your specialty fly shop, you're probably going to find more rod lengths and weights within our assortment to kind of, if you're building a quiver as an example, and you've spent all your money on a 9-foot 5 weight, and that's kind of your go-to daily driver. And if you're looking at a smaller rod weight or a larger rod weight as an example, and you don't want to cough up another $1,000, you're likely going to be able to find it in one of our other rod families, whether it's the Legend Elite, the Imperial, or the Connect, to kind of make it more feasible to build out your quiver of rods to give yourself access to more fisheries that you're interested in checking out, whether it's small brook trout fishing, bluegill fishing, or something that's on the larger side, big bass or redfish or tarpon or anything saltwater related, and spend more time on the experience than the product at the end of the day. Now, of course, we're always going to have a consumer demographic that doesn't care, and they always want the best of the best, no matter what it is. But we're really here to kind of serve a wider range of the blue collar market that I think hopefully resonates and identifies with St. Croix, that you can get some of the most advanced, best in class rod actions and carbon fiber that's on the market today at a price that's going to be hopefully more competitive than what else you're seeing on the shelf.
And is the Connect the one that's the lower price point that's out
Hmm.
there? Yeah.
Yep. That's $295.
Yeah, and that's the Connect. And on that, how do you, well, again, this is more back just to these are all four piece are pretty much standard. Is that pretty much what most of your rods are, four piece?
Yeah, all in our assortment currently. It's all four piece. I take that back. We got a couple of small 2-weight and 3-weight rods in the Imperial family that are two piece right now. But everything else is going to be four piece. And I think that that's largely consumer driven because so many of our guys are breaking rods down and we're traveling with them that a two piece rod just is not all that convenient to travel with. But you can build some beautiful product with two-piece and three-piece rod designs, and they exist from some of the competitive set out there. They become just a little bit more solving a specific problem, filling a particular niche within the space. But yeah, right now, all of our stuff, for the most part, with the exception of those two Imperials, is four piece.
Four piece. And what about on the cork? And again, going back to the old custom rods you can choose your cork. How important do you think it is to get the right cork? And I can't remember the names, but like the full wells versus the different type, or what's your take on that?
I think that we put a lot of specific thought into handle shape and handle design. If you're clicking around the web page, you're going to find something that speaks specifically to that. As a caster, the grip that you use, I think becomes more important to, improve your overall casting. So if you've got a lot of consistency with how you grip the rod, I think that that's important to, be able to take yourself to the next level.
Yeah, to find the
and be able to engage different parts of the rod during your casting stroke. If you grip it up a little bit higher, you're shortening the rod a little bit. You're not engaging as much of the blink. The rod's probably going to become a little bit quicker. You'll be able to utilize the rod a little bit more so off the tip. Conversely, you drop your hand down at the bottom of the grip closest to the reel. You're going to engage as much of the rod blank as possible. It's going to bend deeper, give you the ability to carry more line, heavier loads, bigger flies or bigger fly lines. So yeah, just having a grip that I think accommodates a wide user base of how they grab the fly rod is just super important at the end of the day.
Yep, gotcha. So you have a few different types of grips. And what on those grips is it? Again, I think. Do you remember the names of the style of the grip? Is that important, or is there just a few different styles now of different cork handles?
Oh, yeah. We've got a large convention of named grip designs. We've got the modified full wells, the modified micro full wells, and that's just, the overall length of the handle is what kind of separates those two. A modified full wells, that's something that you would find on a saltwater rod. The micro full wells is just because of its shorter overall length. You're going to find that on trout-sized rods. And you got standard full wells, half wells, cigar, so many rods, back in, call it the 2000s, kind of, about when I was first getting into the space, everything had a cigar style grip, but as it kind of the rod actions evolved, so did the handle design, and that's where you started running into these snub nose wells grips or the modified micro full wells grips, because you could kind of engage the rod through more anglers grip on the rod with those styles, instead of kind of just having your thumb near the top or your index finger kind of pointing down the back of the rod during your casting stroke. It just became a more forgiving handle shape to engage a wider user group with.
Gotcha. Okay. And on back to the switch, are you guys going to be doing, was that some of the changes potentially coming up is on the two-handed stuff?
Yeah, for sure. I can't let too much more, out of the bag on that one, but we've got some two-handed stuff that's getting cooked up.
Nice. Yeah, because that's a big, I think up in your neck of the woods, we've definitely had some podcast episodes recently with Spey in some areas that, is not as well known, definitely the big two-handed stuff for steelhead and everything. You're right there in the Great Lakes, right? Lots of opportunity.
Oh yeah, Great Lakes folks over there. It only takes me about 2.5 hours to get to the Olympic Peninsula and fish all those famous rivers out there. So some of that could have been self-serving. Get something that I might use this
right
for this winter steelhead season. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I think it's Yeah, the numbers have been, kind of up and down, but it's from what I've heard about the Olympic is that it's been, there's fishing every year. There's pretty much, there's some fish to be caught. I know Trevor Kovich has been outspoken about that, the fact that,
Sure,
what I mean,
absolutely.
and he's obviously one of the best guides out there. So yeah,
Yeah.
we're coming up here. I think later this winter too. We're going to be heading up and chasing some OP fish because it's a cool area, right? It's definitely this time of year it can be cold and nasty, but what do you love about that part of the world?
Warming up after
Yeah.
after I've been fishing. I don't know. I mean, it's the fish are second to none. I think that if you were looking kind of beyond that, just being that far west and that far north in the U.S. and having the species as amazing as a winter steelhead as your target, it's a lot of suffering. To be frank with you, like you said, the weather being cold, you're not moving a lot, while you're fishing, to cast, take 3 steps, cast, and that gets a little, you'll start to get soaked. I don't care how good your, waterproof stuff is at the end of the day, that's going to permeate through you eventually. And once you're rewarded though, I think that makes up for everything. Just getting your eyes on one, if it's jumping, even if you lose it, or if you're fortunate enough to actually put your hand on its tail, it's an amazing fish and an amazing place out there.
Do you find yourself as you kind of get older? Well, you've already got the warm water bug, right? Do you find yourself trying to plan more of those trips back to the warmer weather?
Yeah, I do. And if I'm ever going to get my wife to kind of tag along, with me, she would very clearly opt for the warmer climates.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Definitely cool. Well, let's kind of start to take it out of here with our little segment. This is like our gear, tips, and tools and resources segment. Today, we've been talking, obviously, fly rods. This is presented by Patagonia and their Swift Current waders. We've been doing a lot of gear talk. It's been fun because, everybody, there's a lot of good gear out there and stuff. And Patagonia is obviously doing some great stuff. We're going to give a shout out to them today. And I want to talk for you. What is some of your other, gear? We were talking rods today. Are you kind of when it comes to fly gear and everything, kind of a nut about everything? You kind of a nerd about all the gear, or what do you got going there?
Oh my gosh, Dave, I'm kind of a minimalist at heart,
Are you? Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I very much like to have a perfectly balanced setup and, perfectly level backing, perfect knots, so that aspect of it.
Right.
I
You're a
pay
perfectionist when it comes to that stuff.
I pay a lot of attention to that, but if I have more than a puck that I got from the fly shop filled with flies in my vest and a couple spools of tippet, I'm hoping that that's all of it, unless I'm in a drift boat or something like that. But, if I can get out there and I think that I've got odds of being successful with the least amount of gear on my body, yeah, it's kind of one of my overall goals.
That's it. I love that. And yeah, so this is always a good one for me because like the pack, the vest, the sling, it sounds like you're just to throw it in your pocket. Do you even have a vest or pack?
Well, I think I've had every one from almost every manufacturer, like a majority of anglers have.
Have you had that? I'm just curious on this one because I don't have this yet, but I've been thinking about getting it since we've been chatting with Patagonia, but they have this sling. It kind of does a bunch of different things, but have you had one of those types of slings? Do you like the sling?
For sure. I thought I did, and I've purchased 5 or 6 of them in my career, and then I find flaw with it, and then it just, it ends up on, getting passed down to somebody else, or, whatever becomes of it. I could, before you buy, come take a look in my garage and see.
Right, you got a bunch of stuff sitting there. I've got the same way. I'm funny with the bags. Like I don't even care. I've got the perfect bag. I'll still buy a new bag if I see it. I'm like, oh God, I got to try that bag. Right, it's a pack or something like that. But so you got a bunch of. So what do you think if you had to pick? Are you more a sling, a hip, a vest? What's your style if you had to pick one tomorrow for a new one?
I think probably a sling if I can get it out of the water. That's important to me, waterproof, specifically in like that, winter steelhead fishing situation. You want it to be waterproof, especially if you wade a little bit deep.
Okay.
And the smaller, the better,
Yeah.
if you can get that size kind of shrunk down to where it doesn't, interfere with your casting stroke or you get your fly line. That's one of the things I can't, same with drift boats, all these things have things to catch fly line on. And that's like a known issue. Nobody's figured that one out yet.
Man, yeah. Well, we're excited. We're going to be testing out. I'm not sure if you heard. I could probably announce it now. I think is the Teton Valley Lodge. You probably heard of them right down on the Teton.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So they're coming out with. We had a podcast with them. I didn't realize. I'm a big kind of a boat nerd. I love the drift boats and rafts and the history. We did a whole history of boats and stuff, and so I know with drift boats. But yeah, they've got a boat. They've got this cool raft coming out. I guess so they got a new. They're kind of a line of raft. And they've been doing boats, so we're going to be getting in that. I think testing some things out this next year.
Super cool. Over in the Teton Valley there?
Yeah, I think we'll get over there, but I think I might actually get it out on some steelhead water too, just because I'm in the market right now for a new boat. And so I'm kind of looking around. I'm kind of, you know what I mean? It's a good chance to test some stuff out.
Yeah.
So there's so many good boats. So that's the thing, just like fly rods, it's hard to find a bad boat. They're just like rods, right?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. But you can make some poor decisions. So yeah, do your research. Absolutely do your research.
Yeah, you got to do your research. Well, let's keep going. A couple more on this gear. So now St. Croix, you guys don't do reels, right? It's just rods?
We have a conventional reel brand called Seven. And
you do? Okay.
There's spinning reels and conventional reels, but no fly reels.
Okay. Well, tell me about that a little bit. Let's go down that track because I know, in our audience, we got lots of people who are listening who are actually conventional fishermen too. So what is the St. Croix? Seven. I don't even know about this. Do you kind of cover it all in the conventional space?
Yep. Yeah. Well, from a St. Croix rod standpoint, yeah, everything's there. Whether it's warm water, offshore, anadromous. They've certainly been building a rod for every fish that swims out there. And
there you go.
2 or 3 years ago, I started a reel brand called Seven, focusing on the conventional side, like I said, on both bait casters and spinning reels, and covering every size of rod, from small trout stuff all the way up to saltwater applications with their assortment as well.
Everything. And what is in the conventional world? Is there one that just is more you sell more of than anything else? One niche out there?
I would say, like a 2000 series spinning reel is probably like, a 5.6 equivalent fly reel. So that's the one that's probably going to do the most. Yeah, not overly big, but something that's going to cover a vast majority, 5-weight equivalent type stuff.
That's right. Have you done a little bit of that, the conventional? Is that something you've tested?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've been doing a bunch of that now that I've got all these new coworkers that are experts in that space. So it's just it's a new discipline to learn. And as enamored as they are with being a good fly caster, I'm as enamored with trying to become as good a bait caster. And I would argue that being an efficient angler with a bait caster is as difficult as angling technique exists. So I think that the learning curve would be longer to master that bait caster.
Oh, really?
Versus trying to master a fly rod with
no kidding. So you think it's harder to learn to master the bait casting stuff versus the fly?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just because there's a whole thing. What is that? Is that just because? I think some people that were in fly would probably think the opposite. They think, well, the fly cast is harder. But what is the hard part of the bait casting? Just learning the reel and
managing the reel effectively so you don't end up with a backlash, but if you tune those critters correctly, that helps minimize it. But if you have like a mist-weighted lure on, and don't pay as much attention to it, you can just grab that fly rod out of the boat and start waving it, pretty quickly, and you're not gonna, run into too many problems.
That's a good point.
You start doing something erratic like that with the bait caster, and you're
toast.
Yeah, you're toast.
You're toast. Yeah, I've done a little bit of the bait. Yeah, I used to the level line, right, for steelhead, and man, that takes some skill. Sure. You can't just go out there and cast a level line without knowing what you're doing.
Yeah.
The spin reel is a little bit different, right? Because you could probably control there too, but the spin's kind of for anybody almost can pick up a spin reel and do that pretty quick.
Yeah. And there's just some techniques, within that conventional space that are unachievable with fly gear. If you're going to try and skip a bait like dock skipping or something like that, which is super effective for, getting bass that live up underneath a boat or whatever, you just can't reach those fish with a fly cast, so that they, that it's one of the self-limiting aspects of, fly fishing. But where there's a will, there's a way. Somebody will probably figure out how to, skip it effectively
That's
eventually.
right. Where do you think fly casting does better than the conventional? Because there's a lot of places where, you hear like steelhead seems like better conventional, with the bait and stuff like that. Is there a place where fly casting maybe does better than the conventional?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Anything that is rapid presentation oriented, and like a salmon fly hatch on a fast moving river, like the South Fork of the Snake or the Madison, where you're trying to present to tight cover, every few feet. You just couldn't do that with conventional gear. You'd have to reel up, reset, and cast in there, and you're going to miss a ton of water, right? So,
Right.
that's one of the efficiency aspects that goes into like the product design or whatever. Fly casting definitely has a strong upper hand with.
Yep. Yeah, it definitely does. Nice. Well, let's take it out of here with just thinking again. Somebody is, and you sell most of your rods, right? You're selling them through, people can buy them through the website, right? And pretty much everybody's doing that now, right? The direct to consumer.
Yeah, I would, as long as I've been in this business, the specialty fly shop is what this industry is built on. So, anytime I've got an opportunity to speak directly to a consumer, I'm always going to encourage them to go to a specialty fly shop, engage with their dealer, and they're going to get the best service. They're going to find, what works for them.
Test out the rods.
Yeah, test out the rods. It's impossible to do that via a website or going into, a larger box store that's not going to have that level of detail. So go to your local fly shop, support those guys all day long.
So that's definitely the place to go. If somebody can't get in there and they're just looking, and they're thinking, okay, I'm going to get a rod. What are the couple of tips you're telling them, if they need to just grab something in there, what are the biggest things before you get a rod?
Maybe identify what a majority of your fishing time is going to be spent doing, kind of hone in from there on what size of rod is going to be appropriate for your conditions and species. YouTube is going to be the greatest vault of rabbit hole of all time.
What do you think about the length? What do you think about the 8.5? The 9 foot 5 weight's kind of your most common, but do you think there's a time where an 8.5 foot 5 weight, 9.5 foot 5? Well, I guess it's more like 10.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Each one of those is, in my opinion, kind of directly related to application. A shorter rod is inherently going to be more accurate because it's closer to your hand, and a longer rod's going to be more efficient at covering more water, so you can cast it further. So like a lake fishing situation is going to be well suited to those longer length rods, but you wouldn't want to use that 10 footer for dry fly fishing at, 45 feet.
No, that's right. But you do have the Euro stuff, right? The nymphing rod is a whole nother, like all these little micro niches, right?
Oh, sure.
And even take it out to more of the, I don't know, tenkara, right? Would you, yeah. I guess, would you even call that more of a fad sort of thing? Because it's still out there, right? There's still some tenkara. I don't think a lot of the brands got into tenkara though, right?
No, but new brands popped up to fill that space. And I think it's been around as far as angling techniques longer than just about anything.
It has,
so
right.
It's probably far from a fad, but I think that, it's just like anybody, whatever you kind of gravitate towards and want to master from a skill set standpoint, more power to them. Go have fun with tenkara, go have fun with Euro nymphing, so long as you're passionate about it and you're working to get better at it, you got my support.
Yep, definitely. And I'm looking at a photo on here. I think was Tom Larimer, was he there at St. Croix for a while before?
Yeah, absolutely.
He was there. Yeah, because Tom was, and we've been chatting with him because he was on the podcast way back in the early days because when we first started, I think he was out in the Oregon somewhere, or at least out in the Northwest out. Mm-hmm. And he was a big spay guy, right? Because I know we talked spay about the Deschutes, and the episode still is one of our most listened to episodes because he broke down like the 5 tips of how to fish the Deschutes River, something like that, right? It was this, but now, so he was there a little bit. Did he have some influence on some of the switch stuff that's there? No,
not currently.
No.
But yeah, some of the forthcoming two-handed stuff for sure. Some of the projects that we've mentioned here with the Evos and the Technica and the Tannic, we worked on those projects together. And ironically enough, he has my old job at Farbank currently.
Oh, he does? No kidding. Oh, there you go. Wow.
That could be more a testament to the size of the industry.
Right.
And maybe the the lack of, I don't know.
It's kind of cool.
I'm struggling for the right word to use there.
Well, it's interesting because for me and most, I mean, I'm talking to everybody, right? A lot of people. So it's interesting to me, and it does seem like it's big, but then you hear stories like that and you realize it's not that big compared, especially like you say, the conventional is way bigger, right? Like much bigger.
Yeah.
Not even close.
So yeah, you got to be real careful what you say about people in this space, because more likely than not, you're going to end up working with them at some point in time.
Exactly. That is so interesting. Cool. Well, this has been fun, Zach. I think, anything else? I think we feel like we've covered your lineup and stuff. Any other items you want to touch base? We've done a good job kind of covering what you have going here.
No, I think we did. I appreciate the opportunity to be on the show, Dave, and, hopefully somebody will listen to it.
Yeah. Well, no, we'll definitely get some listeners. And like I said, I always love kind of getting that history connection. So for me, it's good to see you guys still going strong out there. And we'll keep in touch. Thanks for all your time today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dave.
There you go. If you want to check in with Zack, you can head over to stcroixrods.com and let him know you heard this podcast if you get a chance. And we're turning right around tomorrow. If you're interested in Atlantic salmon, we talked about a little bit. Atlantic salmon going back to Newfoundland. And we're talking brook trout tomorrow. So if you want to hear some good stories about big brook trout, tomorrow's the day. Check in with us. And I think we're going to get out of here. It's getting late tonight. So I hope you're having a good evening. And if it's morning, have a great day or afternoon. And I hope to see you on that next episode. And we will talk to you very soon.